Thank you.
What is DISCOP in a nutshell?
DISCOP Africa in a nutshell, it's a content market. It's a Pan-African content market where buyers and sellers of content merge in order to focus on the business of the entertainment industry. So it's really the lifeline where we create a platform for content buyers, broadcasters, and other platforms, as well as filmmakers and content makers to come together and sort of continue with the transaction of buying and selling content.
Okay. In terms of content, what's driving particularly Africa at the moment?
Well, I guess what's driving Africa is the same thing as what's driving the world today. Television, good content is king all over the world, and what is driving Africa is high-quality content. What we are very proud of with DISCOP Africa is that a fast-growing percentage of our participants, those who sell content, are offering content made in Africa. So what drives, is local content and good quality content.
Yeah, which is vitally important. And we look back to. It's almost surreal thinking that we've only had television for 20 years in South Africa, and I know that you're bringing this quite close to home with this year's session. How are you marking that, our 20th anniversary?
Actually, quite interesting enough, we've got two conference programs. We've got one that's called Disco Pro, where we look at current topical issues, where different stakeholders within the industry get to tackle the different issues that are happening within the industry. And the one that looks at specifically at 20 years is called 20 Years of Television in Africa.
Yeah.
So that's going to be quite interesting, where we've got a couple of stakeholders coming from the rest of the continent. I mean, participation primarily from countries like the Ivory Coast. In particular, we'll talk a bit more about the presence of the Minister of Communications from the Ivory Coast, as well as participants, for instance, from the SABC, which has a massive stand at DISCOP Africa. So we'll be looking at where has television been in the last 20 years and what's next for television with all these exciting changes with video on demand and how we consume content and how we actually consume television. It's a very interesting time to look at it. So within this conference program, these are the kind of things that we'll be looking at. We'll also be trying to create a platform for policymakers and decision makers to get together and sort of synchronize all their different strategies around what's next for television, as well as getting input from the content producers, as well as content producers getting an insight into what broadcasters and other platforms are looking for with regards to content.
It always fascinates me, the future of television, and I suppose you're the right man to talk to when it comes to the evolution of the content of television. You talk about people not really watching live anymore because, it's there, it's on demand. But having spent a little bit of time overseas and seeing how progressive some of the first world markets are, when you look at Africa, how do we compare?
Well, I think that the main difference is in terms of infrastructure, because there's not, for the time being, as much broadband internet available.
Indeed.
But what you see all over the world is that there is indeed a seismic change, where linear television is no longer as powerful as it was before. The consumer wants television anywhere, whenever he wants. Last week, for instance, there were two very important announcements in the United States. HBO, which is a leading premium TV channel with over 70 million subscribers all over the world, they decided to come up with a online platform, which is like really shooting yourself in the foot, because their revenue comes from cable operators. The following day, CBS decided to do the same thing. They also generated a tremendous amount of revenue from redistribution fees. So you see that for the first time in the last few weeks, there has been, because of Netflix also, people recognize the fact that things are indeed changing. And it is, a lot of people are asking important questions, because some bets have been put on the digital, on online. So it's an interesting moment. Very interesting.
Very interesting to see how things are going. I mean, because what you're saying, in a way, you're shooting yourself in the foot, but at the same time, you have to move with the trends. You have to move with what the demand is. But are we doing that here in Africa? Because our needs are the same, we want the same, and yet, obviously, because of some of the limitations, when we look at the continent, who's the most progressive when it comes to broadcasting? Would it be South Africa, or are we being put to the post by another country?
Well, I think it's a very subjective thing, but it's safe to say it would be South Africa. But it's important to note that what DISCOP Africa seeks to do is, for instance, when you talk about content markets, there are content markets across the globe. Now, DISCOP Africa has been hosted in different countries across the continent. But now it's settling in Johannesburg for various reasons, primarily around logistical issues. And what was important to note is that next year is 10 years of DISCOP Africa. But what we saw is that once DISCOP Africa came to the Sandton Convention Center, there was a market increase. There was a sizable increase in terms of the number of participation, both from South Africa as well as from the rest of the African continent, as well as from international participants. So that certainly gives us a sense that South Africa clearly is at the forefront of issues around broadcasting and content, especially with the advent of DTT around the corner, which is due next year. So it's actually a very opportune time to look at what things like DTT mean for content producers, the kind of opportunities this would create in terms of business opportunities. Because we think it's very important that content is not just about the creative aspect. It's also about the business aspect, that people have got to make a living out of this thing. So you've got to participate in a market where you are engaged with people who buy content. So, for instance, broadcasters would naturally buy content. You need to know what their needs are, as opposed to just creating the creative part for yourself. Because that's then what sustains a business and creates production companies to grow and so on.
Well, I mean, we've been delaying DTT for a very, very long time. You talk about next year. I hope it happens next year. Yeah, exactly. How vital is it that we move across to DTT? I mean, I might be putting you on the spot here. For us to progress as a market for content, because we can have so much more content in respect of that. DTT, do you have any views on that and Africa?
Well, I think it's very important that Africa goes. I mean, DTT in the sense that it will expand the reach of content.
Indeed.
It will lower the cost of distributing content. For the consumer, it's once you have digital equipment, it is the ability to access low cost and even free content that you would have never been able to access otherwise. In the countries where DTT has been is available and for a while now, all the research shows that it has allowed people who did not have access to television until then to be able to watch television and to have access to high quality content.
Yeah, indeed, and that's, I think, could be an answer. There's many languages here in Africa.
But content is important. That means that you have to feed those platforms, and you have to really. It's not just tubes. You need content. You need high quality content. You need ways to, as Thabiso said, to monetize your content. You need to get the whole food chain together around the fact that there's going to be, and there's already a huge need in original homegrown content to feed all of these platforms.
Excellent. Gentlemen, I've run out of time, so I think I'm just going to leave it with you, Thabiso, if you don't mind just telling us details. DISCOP, can anybody attend? Is it a closed event? And how do you find more information?
Well, basically, the first point of information is to go onto our website, www.discopafrica.com.
Okay.
You can also give us a call on our office line. It's 011
482
6110.
6110.
Yeah. And basically you have to register, and we appeal to especially local filmmakers and local content producers and sellers to come and participate in a market that's local, because very more often than not people have to go overseas to look for new markets for their content. So for the first time we're bringing those buyers from the international community to South Africa, so there should be participation of local content.
We're expecting 2,000 participants from 80 countries, representing 1,500 companies. And as Thabiso said, it is first and before all a Pan-African market.
Indeed.
We are welcoming TV stations, platform from all over Africa. And this is what really has strengthened DISCOP Africa, is the fact that it's the only place in the world where you can find under one roof so much content made in Africa and so many buyers representing platforms from Africa.
Well, there you have it.
And just a quick one, some of the partners that we have, for instance, for DISCOP Africa, are state institutions which are involved in the development of the sector. I mean, the Department of Arts and Culture is a partner, the Gauteng Film Commission Commission, the
Good.
Film and
So you have got
Publication
government
Board,
buy-in
the
and-
Department of Trade and Industry, so
Yeah.
all state institutions, right up to the National Film and Video Foundation, are participants at DISCOP Africa.
Fantastic. Thabiso, thank you, Patrick. Thank you very,
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Visit that website. You'll find all of the information there, www.discopafrica.com. Let's take a break. We'll see you after this.